I think it's very important for your listeners to know. So the basic concept was that of the starting from the G7, they were the seven largest economies in the world, and they had a lot of influence in all the multilateral development institutions. So the idea of the BRICS emerged from just the economics of it, that the next four largest countries in the world at that time, that is in the late 2000s, 6, 7, 8, 9, were not being represented in the institution. They had a very small share in IMF and World Bank. Their voice was not very prominent or being heard, and therefore it was thought that these next four largest economies, which happen to be China, Russia, BRICS and Brazil, actually at that time perhaps India was the smallest, or maybe Brazil was. So in any case, so the idea was, if they banded together, banded is maybe not the right word, if they coordinated their actions, then they could have a somewhat larger voice in the multilateral development institution, which is basically World Bank, IMF. And when I was there, I did that. I used to hold, and whenever any issue came up, we used to hold meetings together. So that was the basic idea. And in a sense, you could say the secondary idea was that G7 took positions even beyond what happened in the World Bank and IMF. It took views on general issues. And so once there was some coordination, the 6 countries at that time, South Africa had become a member, started thinking of other economic issues where G7 would pronounce on something. For example, let's say carbon taxes or international taxation, how to tax multinationals or whatever. Economic issues which came up outside the multilateral development institution could also be thought of. So that was the thinking, and till the time I was there, this second part had just started. It hadn't really progressed that much, but you can see that as part of the objective. It was kind of consistent with the whole point of setting up BRICS. So as I said, and this is very important, if it's not clear I must explain again, there are two things about the BRICS. It is not supposed to be for bilateral issues. That was not the objective. That has never been true of it while I was there. I was there in Washington from late 2009 to, let's say, late 2012, 3 years, and we had lots of meeting at that time, because you remember it followed the 2008 financial crisis. So there were many new issues coming up where G7 used to coordinate. For example, should capital flows be opened? How much should IMF get involved in macro coordination management? There were many new issues which came up after the global financial crisis, which happened in late 2008. So all those things we used to discuss. One of us, the EDs, either of Russia, Brazil, I was there at that time, the Chinese ED, when we thought there was some new issue coming up, we would call a meeting and discuss these issues, right? So the purpose was coordination, consensus. The BRICS has always been a consensus organization. So if one of the individuals, countries, it could be China, often it turned out during my tenure it was China, which did not want any kind of consensus and a statement or statement. Basically what we used to do is coordinate, make a statement, and then try to push it, let's say in the IMF, because I was ED in the IMF. Similar things presumably in the World Bank. So the idea, we must keep in mind this false understanding that X or Y is the leader is just wrong. It's a consensus organization as it stood. The idea was to coordinate things which are of common interest. So if any individual country thought for whatever reason, right or wrong, that is not the issue, that this was not of interest to them, there would be no coordination. Okay? So, that is the key thing to remember from the historical process. The interests of emerging market economies are not the same as high developing countries. To give two examples, one is they were the source of capital at that time. Remember, we can discuss how it may or has evolved, but at that time they were the source of capital. We were the borrowers. By we, I don't mean only the 4 or 5, but in some sense we also took on board, yes, I should have mentioned that, or took on board issues which were interest to others who were not necessarily members of BRICS, but they may be countries which needed loans. So, for example, during the European crisis, the global financial crisis affected the European countries. So, we felt that too much money was being given to Europeans and easier and easier conditions. So, then were given to our people which we represented. It's not that we were borrowing anymore. None of us were borrowing from the IMF, but we represented the views of those who were still borrowing, who are poorer countries, let's say, or less developed countries. So, it wasn't just our own interest, it was also the interests of all those which were not represented by the G7. So, that was the idea, but the evolution, I said, was one is to represent this within the institution, but there are also issues which are not being discussed or debated or taken up in these institutions. The idea was, can we now expand this coordination to other issues? And that's in a sense where I left it. So, I don't know the details of all the issues which came up, but I do remember on the last agenda there were things like international taxation and things like that. Well, for example, I can tell you from my personal experience, when the issue of capital controls or monitoring of capital flows by the IMF, you see the IMF charter as it stands, they monitor current account deficits, but they have no formal authority to monitor capital flows. Okay? So, one of the issues which G7 had proposed was that capital flows should also form a formal part of the thing. It's not the informal, I mean anybody can do research on anything, but they had no formal authority in a sense to direct us or give grades or something, right. So the issue was the G7 were trying to put this on the formal authority. Given our experience, we had a lot of experience during the reforms, etc., where I was there and I used to work with the RBI on the difficulties that arise sometimes in terms of huge inflows of capital flows and outflows. So, we felt this is something which they do not understand our situation, because they are the sources, we are the receivers, we have experience, real experience. I am not talking now politics, I am talking about economics. Okay? We have experience of managing it. So, you cannot just impose the conditions which they have there, because they do not have that experience. So, in that sense we managed to dilute and maybe get a lot more of wins, by coordinating, because your voice is always more powerful. Suppose I was alone arguing as executive director in the IMF, this issue came up, but we coordinated. We said, here is our position, here are, listen to everybody and put out a statement. So that increased joint influence on an issue where we had a consensus. UPI is the best system in the world, but unless other people think that, and whatever else we merge with it, SWIFT-like thing, it can be done, right. There are now technologies, block ledger, all kinds of technologies which can be used to link a UPI type of system with a SWIFT system. But the issue is others have to accept it now. So, we will obviously, I mean, it's a natural evolution. I am not privy to all the details of what RBI and finance are thinking, but it's a natural, as an economist, it's a natural evolution for us to develop the UPI as an international payment system. So, let us take one at a time. One is the currency. See, currencies, as far as currency is concerned, currencies which were in a sense reserve currencies were US, Britain, Germany and Japan. Germany till it became the EU, then it became the EU. There is no, the coordination does not come in developing a currency, it comes in managing it. So, the US developed its own currency and it became reserve currency because of the things they did domestically. It had nothing to do with the thing. So, why I am trying to explain is a mechanism cannot be I think easily created. If you look at the history, some currencies will grow faster and get greater acceptability. All that coordination can do historically, I do not know if we are going to be a pioneer, you can speculate. But normally what happens is, let us say China or ourselves, we want to gradually internationalize our own currency, step by step. So, we will all try to make our own currencies international, and then the issue of coordinate comes in. The coordination is for stability. That is what the developed countries. Remember, I am contrasting G7 with the BRICS. Okay. So, what happened was each had its natural role in the reserve system, but the coordination was only to keep it stable. So, the same kind of thing can happen, but I do not think coordination can promote, because every country wants their own currency to be the international currency. So, the most likely thing is that all of us will try to develop, whoever wants to, I mean obviously the larger countries, will try to promote their own currencies to become reserve currencies, but the issues of coordination, the these rapid movements in capital which make currency stable, those are the kind of things which can and I presume will be coordinated once this occurs. But right now there is no challenge, the G7 currencies, if you want, are still much stronger, though the renminbi is coming up. It's really very hard to talk about the BRICS, expanded BRICS. I think roughly 5 or 6 new members, basically doubled, right? So we do not even know what they are saying. I mean, there is no public information. I mean, I could give you detailed information because I was involved. Now, I do not even know what let us say the new members are saying. So, we will hear about that and then be able to figure out. So, it is hard to say what is the BRICS members expect on specific economic issues. But I think the broad reason why so many countries want to join in, that they feel it gives them a certain amount of respectability in a global context. Now, I want to be careful when I say respectability. There are lots of regional organizations. So, those are respectable, but they are not global, right. So, there will be an Asian Development Bank, African Development, whatever, there will be a Middle East GCC, etc. There are all these organizations, but they are all regional. So, perhaps many of the countries in these areas feel that they want to be part equal partner. This is something again which comments keep saying A country or B country, I do not want to name, is the leader or driving it. That is just not how BRICS worked, unless it completely transforms, which I do not think it is in the interest of either the current members or the others. Some country D may feel that they are the leader, but that is not how the BRICS has functioned till now, and hopefully will not function, because it is not in the interest of all the other members. It is not a question of appointing a leader or getting diktats from some country. So, which is why countries want to join, because they want a voice, okay? They want to be heard. Then they all have to get to a consensus. There is no dictatorship. That is the main point I want to emphasize. Somehow there are commentators, I will again not name the countries of origin, but they seem to feel somehow there is a dictatorship here. No, it is the fundamental principle of BRICS has always been consensus. So, you have to convince the members. Okay, leave that aside. So what is the expectation? I think the expectation of the new members is, one, they will get a voice, and the same thing, that things which they feel and they are accepted by the rest of the member then gives weight, okay, weight to their own views. Okay. Then they can say, I have been in favor of such and such view and it has been endorsed by BRICS. That gives gravitas. Okay. So, I think that is the reasoning of many of the countries, but again without naming any countries, I think the very large countries in BRICS may have an opposite view. They somehow feel that they can use the organization to bend it to their own purposes. They will try, but I do not think it will be acceptable to members, and it is certainly not in the interests of India. This is not a bilateral forum, but we can certainly raise the issues which we are raising bilaterally in this forum. So, you know, one of the things which PM and the whole government has been talking about is digital public goods. Okay. So, clearly Indian government has been putting this on the agenda of every organization. So, I would not be surprised at all if this is also put on the agenda of BRICS. Obviously, the discussion depends on how many other people are discussing, how many other issues are there, right. Looking at it positively in objective or goal terms, clearly if there are, just like in G7 or the BRICS 4 or 5, we used to exchange views, right. So, in the sense, I mean, again I can tell you an example, and I am sure same thing will happen, is that I got to understand the views of other countries, including PRC, right, which otherwise I may not have got, but they will say something. It is not that the thing, but I am a China expert, I can understand what is going on. Once they say something, what is going on behind. So it gives you an opportunity to get a slightly deeper understanding of what people are saying, which is always useful. You see, the usefulness does not have to be direct, that I say something and something happens. It is also the interaction. In much of these fora, the interaction and how people say what is their thing,